Orcas are among the most breathtaking creatures on Earth, making them a star attraction at major ocean parks. But behind the dazzling performances lies a harsh reality. These intelligent animals are often mistreated and exploited for entertainment. What many forget is that orcas aren't just beautiful, they're also powerful and unpredictable. Today, we're diving into shocking stories where trainers face the ultimate consequence: deadly encounters with the very orcas they trained. While parks have tried to keep some of these incidents hidden, we're here to reveal them all. On May 16, 2012, Blue Horizon Marine Park in San Diego was buzzing with excitement for its summer season opener. Known for its intimate shows and innovative training techniques, Blue Horizon offered visitors a closer look at marine life than larger parks like SeaWorld. The park's star was Aurora, a 16-year-old female orca captured off the coast of Russia in 2001. At 19 feet long and weighing 8,000 pounds, Aurora was smaller than most performing orcas. But what she lacked in size, she made up for with intelligence and exciting, unpredictable behavior. Blue Horizon had been a staple of San Diego's tourist scene for decades. Founded in the early 1980s as a small marine education center, it grew steadily, expanding its facilities and adding performances to attract larger crowds. Unlike larger parks, Blue Horizon marketed itself as a more personal experience, focusing on trainer-animal interactions and emphasizing conservation and education. It quickly became a favorite among families, offering up-close encounters with dolphins, sea lions, and of course Aurora, the park's most popular attraction. By the 2000s, Blue Horizon had built a loyal following, known for pushing the boundaries of marine mammal performance while maintaining a family-first atmosphere. The Orca tank at Blue Horizon held 1.5 million gallons of water and had an observation platform that allowed audiences a full view of the pool's 40-foot depth. However, the park's smaller size and fewer resources meant it sometimes operated on thinner margins. Management often walked a fine line between innovation and risk, striving to remain competitive in an increasingly crowded market. That pressure to stand out would set the stage for what was about to unfold. In the spotlight that day was Sophia Chen, a 22-year-old trainer with a deep passion for marine life. Raised in Huntington Beach, California, Sophia had been fascinated by the ocean for as long as anyone could remember. As a child, she spent hours at the tide pools, carefully observing starfish and anemones, dreaming of the day she could work with marine animals. Her father, a marine biologist, was her greatest inspiration, taking her on early morning boat trips to tag dolphins and study migrating whales. Those shared experiences sparked something in Sophia, a lifelong desire to bridge the gap between humans and the creatures of the sea. But her path wasn't without its challenges. Her father passed away unexpectedly when she was 16, leaving a void that only deepened her connection to the ocean. It became her sanctuary, a place where she felt closest to him. Determined to honor his memory, Sophia threw herself into her studies, eventually earning a degree in marine biology and interning at Blue Horizon, where her talent quickly became evident. By 22, Sophia had become one of the youngest senior trainers at Blue Horizon. Known for her patience and calm demeanor, she had a gift for working with the park's more difficult animals. None more so than Aurora. Trainers often struggled to maintain the orca's attention, but Sophia could engage her for hours, earning the trust of the 8,000-pound predator in a way few others had. Colleagues often said that Sophia had a natural connection with the orca, one that seemed almost unspoken. Aurora in many ways became a symbol of Sophia's resilience, an unpredictable wild force that she worked tirelessly to understand and bond with. The park's management capitalized on this relationship, pushing her into high-profile performances and marketing campaigns. To the public, Sophia was the park's rising star, someone with a bright future who seemed born to be in the water, riding the waves alongside the ocean's most powerful creatures. But behind the scenes, tensions were growing. Trainers with years of experience had begun noticing changes in Aurora's behavior. Jessica Martinez, the head trainer, observed subtle but concerning signs: refusing food, vocalizing in unfamiliar patterns, and ignoring established cues during rehearsals. These behaviors, while not overtly aggressive, were clear indicators of stress and unease, setting off alarms among senior staff. Just weeks earlier, during a rehearsal, Aurora had refused to perform the breach maneuver and exhibited signs of agitation. Jessica raised her concerns about the new high-risk routine planned for the afternoon show, a maneuver that required Sophia to ride on Aurora's back for a full circle around the tank, ending in a synchronized breach. She recommended postponing the performance until Aurora could be fully evaluated. Management, however, had other ideas. Sophia was a rising star, and the unique bond between her and Aurora had become a centerpiece of the park's marketing strategy. The morning show's flawless execution only strengthened their resolve to push forward. With a packed stadium and the promise of a spectacular performance, the show would go on. At 2:30 p.m., the stadium was packed with over 3,000 spectators. Sophia smiled and waved to the crowd before stepping onto the platform. The routine began as planned. Aurora performed her initial behaviors, spy hops, tail slaps, and vocalizations with precision, delighting the audience. But Jessica noticed the orca's movements were becoming rigid, her turn sharper than usual. Sophia, focused on the crowd's excitement, missed these subtle signs. As she slid into the water, the audience fell silent in anticipation of the grand finale. Sophia positioned herself near Aurora's dorsal fin, preparing for the synchronized breach. Without warning, Aurora twisted violently, clamping down on Sophia's torso. The crowd's cheers turned to horrified screams as the orca dragged Sophia to the bottom of the 40-foot tank. The water, crystal clear, left nothing to the imagination. Spectators watched in shock as Aurora pinned Sophia against the bottom of the pool. Trainers on the platform slapped the water with poles and deployed the emergency net, but Aurora ignored them. The orca held Sophia underwater for nearly 2 minutes, surfacing briefly before diving again. Each time Sophia resurfaced, her movements grew weaker. Aurora's grip remained unrelenting as she thrashed Sophia through the water. Her powerful tail churned up waves that crashed against the tank's edges, sending sprays of water over the stunned onlookers. Sophia managed to break free for a fleeting moment, gasping for air, but Aurora lunged again, pulling her under. The trainer's shouts grew more frantic as they tried to distract the orca with food buckets, a last-ditch effort that had worked in emergencies before. But Aurora refused to respond. The struggle continued for over 3 minutes, the orca's raw strength overwhelming any attempt to save the young trainer. Blood began to cloud the water, a dark and chilling contrast against the bright blue of the tank. When rescue divers finally reached her, they pulled her lifeless body from the water. Emergency responders performed CPR as she was rushed to UC San Diego Medical Center, but it was too late. Sophia was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The autopsy revealed catastrophic injuries. multiple broken ribs, a punctured lung, and a severed spinal cord. Drowning was listed as the official cause of death. The aftermath was swift and unforgiving. Blue Horizon faced intense scrutiny for ignoring warning signs and failing to implement proper safety protocols. Internal documents revealed that senior trainers had raised concerns about Aurora's increasing stress, only to be overruled by management. The park was fined heavily and within a year permanently shut down its Orca program. Aurora was retired from performances and relocated to a facility focused on research and rehabilitation. The incident led to increased caution when working with orcas in captivity, though it didn't result in a complete ban. Among trainers, awareness of the risks was heightened. But as our next story reveals, having multiple trainers on site is not enough. Without proper training, even though you may be cautious, a single mistake can lead to a fatal outcome and the tragic death of an orca trainer. It was a crisp, breezy morning on July 6, 1991 in San Diego, California. The SeaWorld Park, normally bustling with families and eager tourists, seemed quieter than usual as the sounds of excited chatter and laughter filled the air. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the crowd, while the occasional call of a distant seagull added to the peaceful ambiance. Visitors milled about, absorbing the sights and sounds of the ocean, unaware that the performance they were about to witness would shatter the tranquil mood and lead to a tragic event that would leave a permanent scar on the park's legacy. Jonathan Smith, a 20-year-old marine animal trainer, stood backstage near the massive Orca tank. He had always dreamed of working with marine animals, and at such a young age his dream had come true. Jonathan had recently been hired at SeaWorld, and this performance would be his first time working with Can-Do, one of the park's most famous orcas. He had heard the whispers from the other trainers about Can-Do's unpredictable behavior, but they reassured him that it was just part of the nature of working with such powerful creatures. But Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that something was different today. He was about to face Can-Do in the water, but he hadn't fully realized the risk he was about to take. Can-Do, a 19-foot orca, was one of SeaWorld's prized animals. Born in the wild off the coast of Iceland in 1977, she was captured at the age of 3 and brought to the park. Her size and strength made her a staple of the shows at SeaWorld, where she had dazzled audiences with her agility and beauty. But beneath her mesmerizing exterior, Can-Do harbored signs of distress. The years spent in captivity had begun to take a toll on her behavior. Over time, her interactions with the trainers became more unpredictable. Moments of aggression and erratic movements were becoming more frequent, especially when it was time for her to perform. Her behavior had become a known risk, though the park continued to push her into performances, as she was one of their top attractions. Jonathan had trained with orcas before, but never one as large and potentially dangerous as Can-Do. Despite his nerves, he trusted the safety protocols and the guidance of his senior trainers, who assured him everything would go smoothly. As the show began, everything seemed normal. Can-Do performed her tricks with her usual grace, thrilling the audience as she breached the surface of the tank, sending water cascading through the air. Jonathan, standing at the edge of the tank, gave her the signals, and Can-Do obeyed with the precision she had become known for. The crowd cheered as the routine went on, but as the performance neared its end and it was time for Jonathan to enter the water with Can-Do for the final act, something began to shift. Can-Do's movements became less fluid, more erratic. Her tail slapped against the water with an intensity that sent ripples across the tank. When Jonathan entered the water beside Can-Do, the orca circled him in an unsettling way, her eyes no longer meeting his, but darting around as if searching for something. Jonathan signaled for the breach the moment when Candu would rise above him, but instead she swam past him, ignoring his cues. Candu swam in tight circles, her body tense and her movements jarring. He repeated the signal more firmly this time, but Candu didn't respond. Suddenly, Candu swam directly at Jonathan. The audience gasped as Candu's massive body slammed into him, knocking him off his feet. Her teeth sank into his arm with terrifying force, dragging him beneath the surface. The water around them churned violently as Candu thrashed Jonathan, her powerful jaws clamping down on his body. Jonathan's attempts to break free were futile against the strength of the orca. He was trapped, unable to escape the grip of the animal that moments before had been his partner in the show. The crowd watched in frozen horror, their gasps turning to screams as they realized this was no longer part of the act. For several minutes, Jonathan was pulled and slammed against the tank walls. Candu's grip did not relent, and another orca, Keanu, joined the attack, further complicating the desperate scene. The show's other trainers screamed for help, tossing buoy rings and anything they could find into the water. But Candu seemed oblivious to their efforts, focused solely on the young trainer she had trapped. Blood began to cloud the water, and it became clear that the situation was dire. When Candu finally released Jonathan, his limp body floated to the surface unconscious. The scene was chaotic. Divers plunged into the tank, pulling Jonathan to safety, but the damage had been done. Paramedics rushed to the scene, performing CPR as Jonathan was quickly transported to a nearby hospital. Jonathan survived the incident but suffered serious injuries, including bruised ribs, internal organ damage, and a laceration to his liver caused by Candu's jaws. He was hospitalized for 9 days following the attack. In the aftermath of the attack, Jonathan filed a lawsuit against SeaWorld, alleging negligence and seeking damages for the harm caused by Candu and the other orca involved. The lawsuit highlighted the park's failure to address the growing signs of aggression in the orcas and the risks associated with their captivity. Jonathan claimed that despite the known risks, SeaWorld had allowed him to participate in a performance with Candu without proper safeguards or training for handling such aggressive behavior. The lawsuit was settled out of court, but the incident brought significant attention to the safety of trainers and the ethics of orca captivity, fueling ongoing debates about the treatment of marine mammals in entertainment. Candu, once a symbol of SeaWorld's success, was temporarily removed from the performance schedule, though the emotional and physical scars from the attack would remain. SeaWorld continued to face scrutiny, and the tragic incident with Jonathan Smith became a painful reminder of the risks inherent in captivity. However, Jonathan Smith's harrowing incident was not the only one of its kind at SeaWorld. John Sillick, another experienced trainer, would soon face the same aggression from orcas that had gone unchecked for years. Despite the mounting incidents, SeaWorld continued to ignore the growing signs of danger. What followed would have horrific consequences, exposing just how dangerously close the park came to repeating its past mistakes. It was a serene afternoon on July 11, 2006 in Monterey, California. The sun hung lazily in the sky, casting long, golden rays over the Pacific Ocean. Seaside Marine Park, a beloved local attraction, buzzed with life as visitors strolled past exhibits, taking in the beauty of the coastal setting. The sound of waves crashing gently against the shore blended with the laughter of children and the distant calls of seagulls. The bright, warm atmosphere belied the tension that quietly simmered beneath the surface. especially for those who worked behind the scenes. Seaside Marine Park, nestled along the stunning coast of Monterey, California, had been a popular attraction since its opening in 1987. Initially focused on rehabilitating injured marine life, the park expanded in the late 1990s to feature high-energy shows with dolphins, sea lions, and eventually its prized orca Nero. Captured off the coast of Iceland in 1995, Nero was separated from his pod at just 3 years old, an experience that left a mark on the young orca. Despite his early trauma, Nero quickly became the park's star. Seaside Marine Park averaged 8,000 visitors weekly, with the orca shows accounting for nearly 60% of ticket sales. By 2006, Nero was performing 5 shows per week, each featuring choreographed routines that emphasized his size and agility. His powerful size, 19 feet long and weighing 9,000 pounds, and his high-energy performances made him a crowd favorite. However, beneath his majestic exterior, Nero's behavior began to show signs of distress. Lila Weston, 25, had always been captivated by the ocean. Growing up in San Francisco, she spent countless hours watching documentaries about marine life, her curiosity about the creatures beneath the surface shaping her childhood. Her fascination with orcas was sparked at age 7 during a family trip to Seaside Marine Park, where she first saw Nero perform. From that moment, she was determined to work with marine mammals. Her older sister Emma had already set the path, working as a senior trainer at Seaside Marine Park when Lila was still in high school. Inspired by Emma's dedication, Lila pursued a degree in marine biology and joined the park as a trainer in 2005. The two sisters formed a close-knit team, working side by side, with Lila quickly becoming one of Nero's primary trainers. Compassionate, driven, and deeply empathetic, Lila was respected by her colleagues for her ability to balance professionalism with genuine care for the animals she worked with. Outside the park, Lila spent her weekends volunteering at wildlife rescue centers and hiking along the California coast, always feeling connected to nature. By early 2006, however, Lila began noticing subtle changes in Nero's behavior. The once majestic orca, whose high-energy performances had always captivated the crowd, started showing signs of stress. Nero began slamming his tail against the tank walls, refusing to eat and ignoring commands. Lila documented these changes carefully, concerned that the constant demands of his performance schedule were taking a toll on him. Despite her repeated warnings to park management, they dismissed her concerns, claiming Nero's behavior was within the normal limits for a captive orca. She confided in Emma just days before the incident, telling her she feared for both Nero's welfare and the safety of the trainers. Emma encouraged her to keep pushing for change, but both sisters felt powerless against the park's priorities. Eventually, the park would acknowledge the danger, but far too late and in the worst way possible. As the audience settled into their seats on June 11th for the park's most popular show, the Orca performance, Lila stood at the edge of the tank. Emma stood by her side watching intently. The sisters shared quiet worries amongst themselves about Nero's increasingly concerning change in behavior. The performance began like any other. Nero executed his opening tricks with the usual energy, performing a series of breaches and tail slaps, thrilling the audience. Lila guided him through each movement with the precision of years of training. The crowd cheered, and Nero seemed to respond well, just as he had done so many times before. But as the show continued, Nero's behavior was becoming less predictable. He was slower to respond to commands and seemed to be distracted by something beneath the surface of the water. Yet the performance went on and no one in the crowd seemed to notice. The final act of the show was always the high-flying breach, a move that had become a signature of Lila and Nero's performances. Lila would enter the water alongside Nero, swimming with him for a few moments before signaling for the grand finale. Nero would breach the water, soaring through the air and diving back down, just missing Lila's body as he arced above her. It was a thrilling display of trust and synchronization, one that had captivated audiences for years. But today, as Lila slid into the water beside him, she felt a creeping unease that she couldn't shake. Nero swam with her as he always had, but there was something off about his movements. They were jerky, less fluid, and his usual grace was replaced by a subtle tension in his body. Lila signaled for him to begin the breach, but Nero didn't follow the command. Instead, he swam around her in tight circles, his eyes wide and unfocused, as if distracted. Lila raised her hand again, more forcefully this time, but Nero didn't seem to acknowledge her. His movements became more frantic, his body tightening with every stroke. Nero failed to follow the cues, his movements growing more erratic, drifting further from the routine they had perfected. Then Nero attacked. The roar of the crowd went silent in an instant. A gasp filled the air as Nero's massive body shot toward Lila, his jaws closing around her leg with terrifying speed. The water churned violently as Nero dragged Lila under, his strength overwhelming. Lila screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the roar of the tank. For a moment, the audience was frozen in confusion, unsure if this was part of the act. But when they saw the frantic flailing of Lila's body and the blood rising to the surface, the reality of the situation became tragically clear. Trainers on the platform rushed to act, tossing life rings and shouting commands in a desperate attempt to redirect Nero's attention. But the Orca remained unresponsive, his focus solely on Lila. Nero continued to thrash violently, slamming Lila's body against the walls of the tank, each impact more brutal than the last. The crowd screamed in horror as the unthinkable unfolded before them. Lila fought against the Orca's grip, but she was no match for his raw power. For nearly 3 minutes, Nero held on to her, the struggle becoming more desperate with each passing second. Finally, with a forceful jerk, Nero released Lila. Her unconscious body floated to the surface of the tank, limp and lifeless. The trainers dove into the water, pulling her from the tank as paramedics rushed to the scene. Lila was quickly rushed to Monterey Community Hospital, but the damage was severe. Despite the efforts of the medical team, Lila was pronounced dead at 3:42 p.m., just over an hour after the attack. In the aftermath, evidence surfaced showing Nero's behavior had been escalating for months, and that Lila had repeatedly voiced her concerns. Despite this, the park had failed to take action. Seaside Marine Park never recovered. Attendance dwindled and sponsors withdrew their support. By mid-2007, the park announced its closure. Nero, the orca who had been at the center of the tragedy, was relocated to a marine sanctuary off the coast of British Columbia, where he could live in a more natural environment. Lila's experience with captive orcas was not an isolated incident. In our next story, we turn to one of the most infamous names in marine parks, SeaWorld. Known worldwide yet steeped in controversy, it sets the stage for another heartbreaking tale. This time, we reveal the story of Jonathan Smith, a man whose encounter with a captive orca exposed the desperate longing of these majestic creatures to return to the wild. On the morning of August 4th, 2014, Ocean View Marine World in Tampa, Florida was already buzzing with activity. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the park's signature blue tanks. Maintenance crews worked quietly around the grounds as trainers prepped for another busy day. The air was heavy with the scent of salt water, and the rhythmic splash of waves in the pools set a calm but deceptive tone. It was a typical summer day, or at least it seemed that way. At 10 a.m., senior trainer David Mitchell prepared for a routine relationship session with Thor, the park's largest orca. At 31, David had spent 8 years working with marine mammals, rising through the ranks to become one of Ocean View's most trusted trainers. Known for his calm, methodical approach and his unwavering focus on safety, David had earned the respect of his peers and the animals he trained. Thor, a 21-foot, 9,000-pound male orca, was the park's main attraction. Captured near Iceland in 1992, he had been at Ocean View for decades. Although impressive and generally reliable, Thor had a history that made him unpredictable. He had been involved in 2 previous incidents, both the result of trainers breaching safety protocols. Thor's first recorded incident occurred in 2006 when a trainer was pulled into the water, resulting in a 3-month suspension of in-water interactions. The second incident occurred in 2012 when Thor refused to release a training object and aggressively rammed the tank wall during a high-energy session. No trainers were injured, but the event led to temporary changes in Thor's exercise routines. In response, the park implemented stricter rules, requiring at least 3 experienced trainers for every orca session and mandatory emergency drills to prepare for worst-case scenarios. That morning, David was joined by 2 newer trainers, Amy Rodriguez and Keith Parker. Both had recently completed their basic training but were still months away from being cleared for water work. Their job was to maintain safety positions around the tank while observing and assisting David from the dry side of the pool. The session began smoothly with Thor responding to David's bridge signals, short blasts from a whistle that told the orca he had completed a behavior correctly. At 10:45 a.m., everything changed. As David guided Thor through a set of basic relationship behaviors, Keith made a critical mistake. He left his designated position near the emergency signal podium to get a closer look at David's hand signals. The move seemed minor, but it created a secondary point of focus for Thor. The orca's eyes shifted between David and Keith, a known precursor to incidents documented in marine parks worldwide. David noticed the shift immediately and began backing away while maintaining his bridge signal, a standard response to defuse the situation. But then Amy made the second fatal error. Seeing David step back, she left her post as well, moving toward the edge of the tank. Suddenly, Thor had multiple moving targets. His behavior changed instantly. His previous smooth movements grew erratic, his dorsal fin cutting sharp angles through the water. Without warning, Thor surged forward. His massive head burst from the water with terrifying speed, and before David could react, the orca's jaws clamped around his torso. The force of the bite shattered ribs and pulled David into the pool. Chaos erupted. Amy panicked and pressed the wrong button on the signal podium, triggering the park's show-ending music instead of the emergency siren. Thor, conditioned to associate that sound with positive reinforcement, grew even more agitated. Keith abandoned his post entirely, running toward the pool with a bucket of fish, a move strictly forbidden in emergency protocols. The proper emergency response team, stationed 4 minutes away at the park's central first aid station, wasn't alerted until a maintenance worker noticed the commotion and triggered the correct alarm. During those critical first moments, Thor dragged David to the bottom of the 40-foot pool, holding him underwater for 30 to 45 seconds at a time. Senior trainer Lisa Hammond arrived 90 seconds into the incident and immediately saw the chaos. Amy was frantically cycling through incorrect signals while Keith waved the bucket at Thor. The underwater tone box, the device that should have been activated to recall Thor to the medical pool, sat untouched at Keith's abandoned station. Lisa shouted for Amy and Keith to clear the area, but Thor was beyond control. Each time David surfaced, gasping for air, Thor would pull him back down with increasing force. The Orca slammed him into the tank walls, his thrashing growing more violent with each passing second. The rapid response team arrived at the 4-minute mark, but by then David had been submerged multiple times. When Thor finally released him, his body floated near the medical pool, unresponsive. Paramedics rushed David to Tampa General Hospital, but the damage was too severe. The initial bite had crushed his rib cage, causing internal bleeding, but it was the prolonged submersion that proved fatal. Despite resuscitation efforts, David was pronounced dead at 11:27 a.m. Later, autopsy results showed that the initial bite shattered 5 ribs and punctured his left lung, while drowning was listed as the official cause of death due to prolonged submersion. The investigation that followed uncovered a series of troubling oversights. While Ocean View had updated its emergency protocols after a high-profile incident at another marine park in 2010, those protocols hadn't been properly enforced. Security footage revealed that neither Amy nor Keith had ever participated in a full emergency simulation, a clear violation of federal regulations requiring monthly drills for all Orca facility staff. OSHA's report highlighted multiple failures. The emergency signal podium wasn't clearly marked with protocol steps, unlike other major facilities that use color-coded buttons and written instructions. The underwater tone box hadn't been tested in over 3 weeks, violating industry standards that required weekly equipment checks. Most damning of all, the park had allowed the session to proceed with only one fully qualified trainer present. Thor was immediately suspended from performances. Within months, he was transferred to a marine facility in Spain with stricter protocols and more experienced staff. He never performed with trainers in the water again. Ocean View Marine World faced severe consequences. OSHA issued $2.5 million in fines for safety violations, the largest penalty ever levied against a marine park. Attendance plummeted as footage of the incident spread online, and within 2 years, the park closed its doors permanently. David Mitchell's death led to sweeping changes across the industry. New regulations required quarterly third-party audits of emergency procedures, mandatory videotaped drills, and annual certification for all staff working near orca pools. His story became required study material in marine mammal training courses, a stark lesson on how even the smallest mistakes can have catastrophic consequences. When working with the ocean's apex predators, no amount of experience can fully mitigate the risks. Their sheer power and unpredictability can turn even the most routine interaction into a life-or-death struggle. In those brief, chaotic moments, a single misstep or overlooked signal can set off a chain of events from which there is no turning back. Thank you for watching. Loro Park, perched along the rugged coastline of Puerto de la Cruz in Tenerife, is a world-renowned sanctuary for some of nature's most awe-inspiring creatures. Spanning 135,000 square meters of lush greenery and vibrant habitats, it welcomes millions of visitors each year, drawn to its extraordinary collection of wildlife. What began as a haven for parrots had over the years blossomed into something far greater, an experience home to dolphins, penguins, and the commanding presence of orcas in its famed Orca Ocean exhibit. The early 2000s marked a turning point for the park, as it ventured into marine life, transforming it into a magnet for thrill seekers and animal lovers alike. At the heart of its appeal were the orca shows, mesmerizing displays of strength, intelligence, and sheer beauty. Audiences marveled as these marine giants leapt into the air, their powerful tails sending cascades of water into the cheering crowds. Yet behind the sparkling waters of the Orca Ocean, a quieter, more complex reality simmered beneath the surface. Tekoa, a 6-year-old male orca weighing over 1,500 kilograms, was one of the stars of the show. His size and power were captivating, but for those who worked closely with him, Tekoa's story was more complicated. Trainers like Claudia had spent years forging a bond with him, learning to read his subtle cues, each flick of a tail or tilt of his massive head revealing hints of his mood. But orcas are wild creatures, their instincts and emotions often inscrutable. While Tekoa had displayed moments of aggression before, they were fleeting, never quite enough to sound the alarm. Until now. What no one could have predicted was how quickly things could change. Beneath the polished surface of the performance, there was an unspoken truth. Even the most skilled trainers could only guess at the storm brewing in Tekoa's mind. And sometimes the waters of Orca Ocean, no matter how crystal clear, could conceal the darkest of depths. Tekoa's early life was marked by disruption. Just months after his birth, he was separated from his mother, Taima, due to her growing aggression, a behavior that had been seen with her previous calves. This aggression was believed to stem from a traumatic experience in her past, where she witnessed her mother, Gudrun, attempt to drown her disabled calf. After the separation, Tekoa was raised by Kalina, a more experienced female orca, and often paired with his half-brother Tuar. Their bond became one of the few constants in Tekoa's turbulent life. In 2004, Tekoa and Tuar were transferred to SeaWorld San Antonio, where they joined a new group of orcas. His time at SeaWorld and later at Laurel Park only intensified the challenges he faced, as he often endured aggression from his peers, leaving visible marks from countless confrontations. Despite these challenges, Tekoa grew into a powerful and unpredictable animal, shaped by a complex past that likely influenced the aggression he would later direct toward his trainers. Claudia Volhart, a 29-year-old marine biologist from Weinheim, Germany, was one of Tekoa's devoted trainers. For her, working with orcas had always been a thrilling and natural experience. Europe's only female orca trainer, Claudia had spent years at Laurel Park, building deep bonds with creatures that most people would only ever glimpse from a distance. A former model turned marine biologist, her shift from the fashion world to the depths of the Orca Ocean had always felt like fate. Through unwavering dedication, she had earned her place at the park, and in the water, she felt an almost mystical connection with Tekoa. But today, as she prepared for another session, an unusual tension hung in the air. It was just another training session, or so it seemed. Claudia stood at the edge of the pool, awaiting Tekoa's signal. His enormous form cut through the water, his dorsal fin slicing through the surface. He approached her calmly, as if to reassure her that nothing was amiss. The session was simple. Tekoa was supposed to nudge Claudia's feet with his snout as they swam together, a typical exercise that highlighted the synchronicity between trainer and orca. Claudia reached out, feeling the cold, smooth surface of the water beneath her. Her movements were fluid, practiced. Tekoa's powerful body surged forward, but something was off. His usual grace was replaced with an unsettling force. She didn't have time to react. In an instant, Tekoa's snout collided with her chest, knocking the air from her lungs. The impact was sudden and Claudia's body slammed against the water with a force that reverberated through her bones. Before she could take another breath, Tekoa surged forward again, and the full weight of his body struck her once more, sending her spiraling beneath the water. Her arms flailed as she tried to stabilize herself, but the water was now a blur of cold, unforgiving depths. Then came the sensation of being pulled, not with gentle guidance, but with the raw, unrelenting strength of an animal that could easily overpower her. Tekoa's massive form dragged her downward, his teeth grazing her arm as he pulled her into the abyss of the pool's deepest point, 40 feet below the surface. A moment of weightlessness. Then the pressure of the water, the sheer depth pushing against her chest, constricting her lungs. Claudia's vision blurred, the world around her fading as the sound of rushing water drowned out everything else. Tekoa's teeth clamped down on her arm, sharp and firm, the feeling like nothing she had ever encountered before. Her mind raced, and yet she couldn't summon the strength to break free. She kicked desperately, but there was no escaping his grip. Seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the force pulling her down released. Tekoa resurfaced, his teeth still clutching her arm, and his powerful muscles propelled them both back to the surface. The air was cold against her face as she gasped for breath, struggling to stay conscious. The world around her came into focus, but the pain in her arm and chest was overwhelming. She tried to scream, but all that emerged was a strangled gasp. Her colleagues who had been standing by the poolside saw the danger unfolding. Without a moment's hesitation, they rushed to the edge, pulling her from the water and away from the grasp of the orca. Claudia's body was limp, her chest heaving as they hauled her to safety. She could barely comprehend what had just happened. The attack, that's what it had been, an attack, had happened so quickly, so unexpectedly, that even she had trouble accepting it. The trainers worked in a blur of action, and soon Claudia was rushed to the hospital. Miraculously, she survived the attack, but her injuries were severe: a broken elbow, a bruised lung, and deep internal trauma. As doctors worked to stabilize her, it became clear that the physical wounds were only part of the ordeal. The mental toll would linger long after the bruises faded. Back at Loro Park, the reality of the situation began to set in. Tekoa had always been a powerful animal, but no one had anticipated that he would lash out with such violence. His previous behaviors had been seen as quirks, not threats, but now the trainers knew the risks more intimately. The park's management decided that water-based training with Tekoa would be suspended indefinitely. The decision, though made in haste, was a painful acknowledgement of the risks inherent in working with orcas. For Claudia, recovery was a slow process, marked by the enduring scars of the attack. The park itself faced irreversible changes. Trainers no longer entered the water with Tekoa, and the once thrilling shows took on a somber tone. Questions about the ethics of captivity grew louder, as Tekoa's actions became a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of even the most trained wild animals, challenging the illusion of control over creatures of such immense power. Claudia's story may have shocked the world, but the real victims are the orcas themselves, forced into a life of captivity they never chose. While trainers willingly step into this world, the orcas are confined, their natural instincts suppressed. Our next story focuses on Candu, an orca whose tragic story reveals the devastating consequences of keeping these majestic creatures in captivity. What started as a thrilling orca show on Christmas Eve at Loro Park Zoo ended in tragedy for star trainer Alexis Martinez. At the peak of his career, Alexis had spent countless hours working with Keto, the orca he'd trained and trusted for years. But in an instant, that trust was shattered in what would become his final performance. Born and raised in Spain, Alexis Martinez had always held a deep fascination for animals. He started working at Loro Park Zoo in 2004, about the time the park introduced orcas to its marine life exhibits. This opportunity had been a dream come true for Alexis, who quickly rose through the ranks to become one of the park's leading trainers. At just 29, he was already recognized for his talent, calm demeanor, and dedication to his work. By the time of the incident, Loro Park housed 4 orcas and employed a small team of specialized trainers, each carefully chosen for their ability to work with these powerful animals. Keto was born in captivity in 1995 at SeaWorld Orlando, far from the wild waters where orcas truly belong. He knew nothing but the confinement of marine tanks, where he was groomed to perform from a young age, trained to execute precise routines for the thrill of a watching crowd. By 2006, he was transferred thousands of miles across the Atlantic to Loro Park in the Canary Islands, where he became a main attraction. But Keto was not just a showpiece. At over 6,600 pounds, he embodied the raw, untamed power of the ocean. Behind those controlled performances lay an unpredictable force. And even with rigorous training, there was always an edge of risk. His immense size, combined with an instinctive power, brought an underlying and constant tension to every interaction. Keto may have been born in captivity, but lurking within was the mind and muscle of a predator, a creature that could turn in an instant. And that Christmas Eve in 2009 would become a day that no trainer or guest at Loro Park would ever forget. The show unfolded with all the excitement and awe the audience had come to expect. Families watched in anticipation, eyes fixed on Alexis and the powerful orca by his side. For Alexis, this night was a chance to display the deep connection and skill built over years with Keto. He had worked tirelessly to perfect each movement, every flip and glide, and tonight it all came together. He was the star trainer, known for his bond with the orcas and his captivating performances, and this night would be no exception. As Alexis slipped into the water, Keto moved beside him, an enormous, sleek form cutting through the pool. Together they danced, a display of strength and elegance rehearsed to perfection. Each command seemed to unlock a moment of brilliance from the orca. Trainers along the edge, including Brian Roich, stood ready, their eyes trained on every flick of Keto's tail and rise of Alexis's hand. The crowd cheered louder with each feat, their applause swelling with every flawless move. Yet, as the performance reached its peak, a tension began to fill the air. Keto's movements shifted, his massive body slowing, his powerful tail cutting through the water with a new intensity. Alexis continued, steady and poised, guiding Keto with a calm certainty. But suddenly, Keto blocked his path, his immense body pressing into the space where Alexis needed to move. The crowd watched, captivated, unaware of the shift. In a terrifying instant, Keto's playful energy turned deadly. With a powerful lunge, he rammed Alexis, pinning him to the bottom of the 40-foot pool. Was this just a display of dominance or something far darker? The audience remained silent, captivated yet unaware, while trainers shouted commands that fell on deaf ears. Keto, locked in, seemed unstoppable, and what had started as a routine show had turned into a nightmare unfolding before their eyes. The horrified crowd, paralyzed by shock, began to realize they were witnessing one of the darkest moments in SeaWorld's history. Was this the moment that would finally shatter the illusion of control over these powerful animals? In that moment, the water turned from a stage to a battleground. Key to